So this is what Grasshopper looks like. It has a pretty much a canvas, and you have these. Let me actually put that on the full screen first. And you have this bar at the top which shows various kind of options, and then these are our basic, toolkits, which under which lie all of these weird looking icons. And if I just do a drop down, I can see more icons. So this is just a preview of all the icons. So these are like clustered together in a particular components, as we call them in Grasshopper language. And then they are clustered into, let's say, parameters. If I hover my mouse, I can read the description as well. So all of the components to do with mathematics are contains here. It says the tab contains 9 panels and 110 components. So there are 9 panels within this. If I select this, I can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And in totality, these are like components. Now every component has a task. Uh, yeah. So every component has a function or a task to perform. And would you suggest AAD book for beginner? Irrelevant question, guys. Let's not ask such questions in between right now, please. Unless there's a question relevant on this thing. So yeah, all of these components have these components. If I drop down and I can see the parameters, mathematics, sets, vectors, curves, surfaces, meshes, intersect, transform, display, and rest is all kind of extra additional components that I have. Most of them are for testing. Most of them are useless. I would never recommend you to pile up your Grasshopper like this, how I have done. I'm highly disorganized in this aspect. But yeah, if you look at these are pretty much sufficient to do a lot of things, which one can do here. If I click on parameter, click on geometry, I can see all of these components. And the good part about Grasshopper is that everything has a very interesting description and an icon. So for example, I can see that the icon pretty much suggests what each of this thing does, right? And there's a description that comes the moment I put a mouse over any of this. So I think that way Grasshopper is very easy to learn and pick as well, because we can always read and spend some time to understand what each command does. And yeah, how it works, it is more like a system or a script, I would say. So for example, let me start with a simple command of going to vectors and or point, and there's a command called construct point. I'm just going to start with that and explain what this does. The moment I select any of the command, I get this icon over here to place something on the canvas. Wherever I click, I get this icon. And let's say this is my icon or a system. How it works is, let me annotate. So this thing has a particular function or a task to perform. In this case, if I take my mouse over this, it says construct a point from XYZ coordinates. And this, what you see on the left hand side, let me annotate again. So the icon suggests what it does. On the left hand side, what you see, so you have a left and a right, and everything goes from left to right in a code, in a visual coding language. Anybody who's familiar with coding, you would know that everything goes from the computer reads information from left to right, top to bottom. It is pretty much the same rule followed here. And this command makes a point. So this is like an algorithm in itself, which is a set of instructions. On the left hand side, you have the inputs, and on the right hand side, you have all the outputs. In this case, I have 3 inputs and I have 1 output. So these 3 you can see are the inputs, and this is your output. So basically, it's saying you give it a value of X coordinate, Y coordinate, and Z coordinate, and it will output a value of a point. Not the value, it will actually make a geometry, which is a point. So that's pretty much how a system works. Inputs, outputs, and these are the nodes. And then this is the information of the input. If I want to understand the information, I can always take my mouse over this, and it kind of reads an instruction. If I take my mouse over the input, it says X coordinate, that's the input, and it says one locally defined value, and the value is 0. So right now this has a default value of 0. And if I look at the Y coordinate, it also has a default value of 0, and so as the Z coordinate. And I'm just going to get another component. You may not have that. I typically use that for teaching. It's called bifocals. It allows you to name all of these commands, so it becomes easier for you to recognize. Now, right now in my Grasshopper, I have all the names visible. Right click, get one curve, that's my curve. And second curve, right click, set one curve, this is my other curve. In Grasshopper, there's a command called tween curve. There's also a plugin called Pufferfish. If you use that, you will get more of tween options, which I sometimes often use. The normal tween curve would ask for a curve A, curve B, and the factor. Now, if you read the description of the factor, it says uh, tween factor 0.0 means curve A, 1.0 means curve B. By default, it has a value of 0.5. So basically, if you keep from 0.0 to 1.0, it will form the particular part of that. 0.5 would be the mid curve in this case. If I put this on A, this as B, right now by default, I'm getting the 0.5. I can also use a slider to make it go from this to this. So basically I can morph any geometry to another geometry. Even if, let's say I use let's say a circle. Maybe use that as my curve. And I can see my geometry going and becoming a circle. Now the only problem is because I don't have same control points, it might just break down a little bit. It may not be that smooth, but you would still get this geometry being made into a circle. Now, if I want more number of options, I can add more of these. So basically, what I want here is multiple numbers to be able to have multiple geometries. So instead of this, I can use a range, and in which my domain would be, it can be 0 to 1 by default. So basically it goes from the first one to the last one, and the steps can be whatever number I want. Let's say 25. And if I put all of this as my factors. So you basically get 25 new geometries, including the first and the last one, because we're using from 0 to 1. So 0 would create the first one, 1 would create the last one, and the intermediate numbers will create the middle ones. I'm able to create these kind of sections of forms. And now let's say I want to do something to these. Let's say rotate these or twist these or scale these. Now I can just start to play them around, play the data with using anything. For example, if I want to rotate them, for example, now use to as my planes. So if I hide the original ones, so what's happening here is I'm able to rotate everything by a certain angle. Now, if I want this to be a variable angle, I can use a series or a range depending on what I want to use. Let's say if I pick up a range and then control that it goes from 0 to 180.
And the number of steps should be the same as the number of tweens that I have, the number of surfaces I have. So how do I measure that? How do I count?
-1.
Oh, but how?
List item.
Yeah, so I will need a list item.
List length.
And do -1. So this is 36 here. I have a 35 number here already because I'm using the steps here to create the tweens. So I can simply use these steps and I don't even have to do an x -1 because I'm using one less step. And I use all of that as my angles. So what you see here is all the geometries are variably turning by a particular angle, which I can control here. So I can pretty much do a twist into 180 degree of this entire geometry. So I've used two geometries, I've tweened them, and then I've converted that into a surface and I'm rotating them to create an interesting form. And of course, it is all dependent on the points as well, which I can change. So the overall form would start to change and affect accordingly. If I already rotate this slightly, it will tween differently. There are some existing meshes available, such as a mesh box, mesh plane, mesh of sphere, which typically one can use. Let's say if I use a mesh sphere, it kind of creates a sphere, which is actually a mesh around a base, and I can choose a particular point where I want to create this. So let's say I create this point, get this to Grasshopper, define a radius, let's say 25, and give it a count of the U and V. So that will define the number of polygons in a mesh, which I can increase or decrease. So that will define the smoothness of the mesh. If I bake this, you can pretty much see here, this is what it looks like. Now you can clearly see it's not really smooth. It's kind of jagged because the number of divisions are lesser. So it's not a very smooth mesh. When you have a NURBS surface, Rhino automatically makes a mesh out of it. Any geometry that you see in three-dimensional space and computer graphics is represented as a mesh, always, even the NURBS. But yeah, you don't see the that's the wireframe version. But if you go to a rendered view, I've switched on the wireframes as well, but that's pretty much what you see. Let me switch on the go to the display settings and switch on the mesh wires, just so I see how the mesh looks like. Yeah, so this is what a mesh is. Now in Grasshopper also I can switch on and off the mesh wires. I can choose the quality of the mesh or choose not to preview the mesh edges at all. Ideally it's useful to have it preview on. So let's say if I have a mesh here, what I can also do is something called a construct mesh. So a mesh is typically constructed using vertices and faces and has some colors as well, which you can define. So let's say if I have a mesh here and I want to make a new mesh out of it, I'm just gonna I'm going to use a command called deconstruct mesh. What a deconstruct mesh does, it kind of breaks it into its constituent parts, which is your faces, your vertices separate, and your colors and the normals. Now if you look at it, let's say there are 182 vertices and then there are 195 faces. So the total number of faces that you have is 195, and then you have optional colors. It says empty right now. No color is defined, and then there are 182 normals. So normals for a mesh will be on your vertices as opposed to what you have in a surface. On a surface you have a normal on the face, but mesh is actually made out of only points, and rest is only faces or fillers between that. So all the normals that you have are actually on the vertices. So if I want to visualize a normal, I can use a vector display at my vertices. These are my normals. You see it as a very small ones. I can use an amplitude. And this is what shows me the normals, which is outward right now. So that's typically what we have here. What one can also do is, if you want to construct a mesh again, you require three inputs. You require the vertices. So let's say if I have these vertices here, you require all the faces as well. I have all the faces here, and sometimes you require the colors if you want to give. So in this case, I'm going to leave it empty. So what this is doing is it's recreating the same mesh from the same information. That's just for you to know that how a mesh can be recreated or rebuilt with more information. Now here is what an opportunity comes to create something interesting, because we are able to deconstruct a mesh into vertices, which are simply points, and are able to recreate that back into vertices. So what if I modify or manipulate or modulate these points? So for example, what if I decide to move these points outward?
I think the TV is going to turn off in a minute.
Yeah. Okay, so I have these vertices here. Let's say I want to move these geometries. Right now everything is moving upward. If I want to move it outward, I can simply use my normals, for example, and let's say use these as my values. So all my points are moved outward now. Let's say if I want to create a new mesh out of this, so these are my vertices, and my faces will be the original faces. So what I get is a mesh which is kind of coming outward. Now this is a simple modulation right now. What I can also do is, what if I want to move these points differently with different, either a range or something? I can also use something called random. What a random does is random creates a set of random numbers. It's very similar to how a range or series work, but it will not go in a particular order. It will go randomly, but within certain constraints. So in this case, for example, if I use, it asks for the domain of numeric range. Now don't get confused. It's asking for a domain, but it says it's a range. So don't actually end up making a range component. It doesn't require that. These are normal issues that usually happen because terminologies are crazy in this. So to get a domain, I'm going to construct a domain, let's say, which goes from let's say 0 to 25, for example. And it asks for how many numbers do you want to create, and it will create that many random numbers between 0 to 25. So for example, if I use a panel and see my numbers, right now the numbers are 1. If I use 35, for example, so 35 random numbers will be generated between 0 and 25. So that's the potential of using random. In this case, I need the same number of numbers as my vertices. So again, I can use a list length. And measure the number of vertices. It's 182. I can take that number here. I don't have to do x minus 1 because it's asking for numbers you want. So it's giving me 182 random numbers. Then there is something called a seed. Seed is a seed of randomness. It's like computers way of defining randomness. And if you change the seed, it will give you a new set of random numbers. So if I choose anything between 0 to 10, every time I change this, a new set of random numbers will be created. So let's say these are my random numbers and I use that on my amplitude. Let me bring this in front. I need to keep doing that just so I don't lose the order of things. So here all the points are randomly moving outward, which I can change the seed but randomly, but within a certain range which I am defining.
From the number from the slider.
Yes.
But it's
So,
still random.
is there a problem with that?
It's very visual. It's very.
No, if you, okay, randomness also has an algorithm behind it. So randomness is never random. I mean, it's a very contradictory statement, but
But is it, you can have access to this.
what is random? How do you define random? Random is not a negative thing, by the way. I don't know. I mean, we usually interpret it as a very negative. Yeah, exactly. So I want 1,000 numbers. And if I ask you, Mary, can you give me 1,000 numbers between 100 to 1,000? Because I want my building heights. I'm designing an urban plan and I want all the building heights to be between 20 meters and 40 meters, but varying slightly. So rather than defining, let's go 32, 36, 33.5. I use an algorithm which creates random numbers between the numbers I want. So it still has a control. It's just that something you can't define. You can take it in an ascending order, but maybe you don't want that. So, yeah. It's a philosophical
Yes. It's,
question.
Can you make it so it does like the extreme values
Yeah.
less often?
Yeah. I mean, like you're defining the extremes basically, and then there is a seed to it. So you will always have both the extremes and everything in intermediate.
But can you have it to say it's between, say your range is between 0 and 5, that most of them are
Towards
around
5 you want.
and then you've got some sort of.
You can do that. You'll have to write another algorithm to define and pull your numbers towards that. That is possible as well. So you can have a little more control. Yeah. But there's no command directly for that as such. So in this case, so my points are moving and I'm using those points to create a mesh. I can also define a color to a mesh. There's something called a gradient which I can use. I don't know if this will take that color. Maybe I'll take the color part later once we have a complex mesh. Now I have a mesh here, but this is not a smooth mesh because it's pretty much like this. Now to smoothen a mesh, there are various algorithms which have been written by a lot of mathematicians because it's to do with computer graphics as well. So there is a plugin called Weaverbird. I don't know if you managed to install this, but Weaverbird has this very interesting way of subdividing and using subdivision algorithms to smoothen a mesh through certain degrees. And the most common one is Catmuck-Clark subdivision or even a loop subdivision. Both are different algorithms. So let's say if I use a loop subdivision, if you want to read the description of it, it says it was described by Charles Loop in 1987 in his mathematics thesis. and how it pretty much works. And Catmull Clark as well. It's by Jim Clark and Edwin Catmull in 1978. So if anybody is interested to actually know more about it, you can actually go through that and read more about the theory of mesh smoothing.
What
It's
is
a
the name we need to
Catmull Clark.
cut more?
Yeah, this is being recorded, don't worry.
What's the name of the plugin?
Weaverbird.
Did we get I think we didn't get a shortcut.
I think there was a link to a website where you have to download.
Yeah, if you will Google it, you will find
Yeah, it's very common.
very
Okay, so what it requires is it requires a mesh. It requires a level of subdividing iteration. So you can run the algorithm through certain iterations. The more you do, the more heavier also it becomes. But in this case, let's say if I take it through this, let me hide the previous one. Now my mesh is kind of smoothened by one level. I would not go beyond 2 or 3 levels. But if I try 2, you can see it's become even more smooth. And if you do 3, it becomes even more smooth. Let me hide the vectors. Yeah, it interpolates it into a smooth mesh. And if I bake this, you can pretty much see that it's a smooth curvilinear geometry. Now this kind of geometry or a form is not very easy to build with the NURBS geometries that you typically use. It's absolutely fluid like a drape, and it's mathematically correct. It's a closed geometry, which is a mesh, has subdivisions. This one is triangulated perfectly, and that's what subdivision would do. So it will triangulate everything, but keep doing it even more iteratively to give it a very, very smooth form. Many of the architectural projects where you see again fluidity, I mean, of course, Armando showed, for example, projects where they use Maya. A lot of people use meshing as well to create these kind of forms because it's comes out to be very smooth. And then you can, I mean, I can use this form to where did it go? Yeah. So if I have this form, I can also then start to do what I wish to do. I can contour it. I mean, now I have the form. Now it's up to me how I wish to contour it, basically, which is kind of interesting because yeah, so you're creating a form and then you're articulating that to something else. You can also use Catmull Clark, which goes slightly different. Again, I will go with 3 levels, and this one gives a slightly different result. Just somewhat this, and this one is not triangulated. This is based off quads, so that may have a different articulation to it. If you want to triangulate, there is something called triangulate all quads in a mesh. You can use that, and then that's your mesh. But it's not really defined in a particular order, as you could see in the other subdivision, because you're manually triangulating all the quads.
The triangulation one, or each cell is planar? No.
Triangle, yes. Triangle will always, yeah, I mean, that's going to be flat. That's, I mean, that's the advantage actually. I mean, like, Quads will never be flat. Triangles are bound to be flat, and they can be because that's the minimum 3 points you require to make a flat plane or a surface. So yeah, this will be flat, and we can extract these and orient these as fabrication.
The lines, the connection between the points it's a straight line.
Yeah. Actually, it depends on the level of subdivision that you use. Yeah, not always. Yeah, I think it's curving. Yeah, never thought of it. And now if I, let's say, want to go with any kind of subdivision and want to go back, change my randomness seed, I can simply change my seed to create different variations of this form. So kind of useful to kind of create various iterations. I can also define the range. It's pretty much like inflating a surface within this. Yeah. So this is one way to kind of manipulate a mesh. Now I can also, instead of my sphere, I could have also used any other kind of mesh. In fact, Weaverbird by default has a couple of meshes. For example, an icosahedron, make a point. And define a radius. So you're going to get an icosahedron as a mesh. Icosahedron is 20-sided polyhedron. It's a platonic solid. And I can smoothen this as well as an icosahedron. So just by using basic mesh and smoothing it, you can kind of do a variety of things. I'll put that on the side. You're going to try making a mesh and smoothen it and see what you get. Just get any kind of meshes. You can go to a mesh, go to primitive. You can make a mesh box or a mesh sphere or even a mesh plane. Start to manipulate the points by moving them in any direction and create a new mesh out of it by using construct mesh. And let's see what we get. So I've used a mesh window here and I'm using a mesh thicken. So this is the kind of geometry. It's really fine. I mean, like, because I've already subdivided it a number of times, so it gets pretty heavy as well. And then let's say if I decide to smoothen it again, let's say if I use a loop subdivision, it's quite heavy right now, but yeah, it's tried to smoothen the entire thing. So now the windows are also looking like little curved. Basically, I can again, maybe I can disable this and I can remove this step and do this here first. So I haven't smoothened it yet. I have the old mesh. I'm not using this guy. So I'm creating these windows here I'm thickening it here, and then I'm gonna smoothen it. So now you'll see you'll get more like an organic kind of a shape, and I can of course increase a subdivision to somewhat like 3. You'll get a very interesting kind of form. If you've seen Ross Lovegrove's work, it's pretty much on the same lines.
Wow.
And let's say if I want to put colors, so I'll use a mesh color option, and I'm going to deconstruct the mesh. So I will use the normals to define the color, and my mesh is this. Yeah. So of course we could not imagine this shape, or could not even make it otherwise, I would say. We started from a sphere, moved certain points, and that's the thing about computation. I mean you can kind of play around, and there are multiple things that one can, yeah. I mean you can 3D print this entire form as an object. It can be a lamp, light, whatever you want.
Not a building.
Yeah.
You never know, in the future, right?
See, randomness can be good at times.
In the future.
Yeah, it's very natural looking kind of a form.
3,000.
Yeah. Let me try and save a visual also of this, which we could not do last time. So let's say view capture to file. I think sometimes when the projector is connected, it doesn't take the screen. That's why it was showing an issue last time. I'm going to do it at scale 1 and 0.2. Yeah, it says successfully saved. Let's have a look. Yeah, this time it has. So it's kind of saved this into a visual, and I can even make it a little more high res as well. So this is like a more like a render, I would say, for me, or even this, for example. Yeah, whatever view we wish to. Yeah, so this is a even higher resolution, so you can see it's kind of very fine and crisp in terms of the visual. So view capture to file is usually used to kind of take a screenshot or whatever you want to do of Rhino screen. Do you want to try this method? Whatever form you have, try to make a picture frame and thicken it and then smoothen it to create a form of this kind of a nature.